Artists don't get down to work until the pain of working is exceeded by the pain of not working. This quote from D. Stabler has really reassured me in my procrastination these last few weeks. And I've talked about procrastination before. Many of you can relate. And I've been hearing from a lot of women about their struggles to sit down, take action, and the temptations of social media that are interfering with what they truly want to do, which is create and be adventurous and enjoy the company of their loved ones. Today, we're talking about how to use pleasure and enjoyment as a motivator. And as human beings, we're always trying to avoid pain, but then we struggle when we spend a lot of time trying to avoid that pain. So let's get into it. Let's get this started. Welcome into the Modern Creative Woman podcast. I'm Dr. Amy Bakos. I am your hostess, and we are here to talk about the art and science of creativity. Specifically today, we are talking about how avoidance makes us feel so bad, and it can often start to mess with our self-concept and how we feel about ourselves if we're avoiding the things that are truly important. Psychology has a lot to say about these issues. From the perspective of behaviorism, there are rewards and punishments and things that we do because we're going to get something, or things we do or don't do because we're trying to avoid pain or consequence. Existential psychology also writes a lot about the avoidance as a struggle. Existential guilt shows up when we realize we're not taking action on the things that are most important. If we're neglecting a relationship, if we are avoiding putting ourselves out there, whatever it is, avoiding what is important leads to existential guilt. And we feel so terrible, we take it personally that we're not doing something. All of these things are pieces of information that can guide us towards what we truly want to do. The difference between people who continue to make art and those who struggle to make art or abandon their projects, it looks the same on the outside. Everyone begins a project, and some of us drop off, some of us stay. Those who continue to make art are usually the people who learned how to continue. And specifically, they learned how to not quit. It's two different skill sets. I participated in a business mastermind a number of years ago. And the one thing that stuck out to me as so important that I think about almost every day is don't quit. And this idea of persisting in spite of how bad it feels, in spite of beginning something that seems impossible, is we have to persist. Thomas Edison, with the thousands and thousands of light bulb prototypes before one actually worked, is this very extreme example. However, you can look around you and see people who are successful in whatever they do, in their education, in their job. They've stuck with the job for a long period of time. They've accomplished personal goals. They all have this thing in common where they did two things. They continued, and they chose not to quit. I have a note that I keep by my desk that says, "I trust I had a good idea when I started." And this was what got me through graduate school when it became so extremely difficult. And for me, the difficult was losing sight of what I was doing and trying to do. Getting wrapped up in statistical procedures made me forget why I was going to school. I want to help people. And it was difficult to see how this was going to help. Ultimately, of course it does. However, when it seemed like I wanted to let go because it would be so much easier to be able to enjoy my life and have a full-time job instead of a part-time job, All of these things seemed way more attractive than going to school when I had lost sight of why I was there. However, this one statement kept me going. I trust I had a good idea when I started. And this is the basis of persisting, or rather, not quitting, when you're starting a project, you're making art, you're building a business, you're engaged in an important relationship or a job that you care about. All of these things require, one, not quitting, and two, persistence. You've heard me on Instagram talk about my struggles with procrastination this year, and I am excited to write. It is interesting to me. I'm delighted that my publisher deems my ideas worthy of publication and that people will be able to benefit from the art therapy toolkit. And yet, I would find myself procrastinating. Social media time increased, puttering around the house increased, this unnecessary moving things around or tidying. I rearranged my bulletin board so many times. Today I cleaned out my bottom drawer in one of my kitchen cabinets where my vitamins are. I took everything out. I moved all the baskets and cleaned them. This is severe procrastination for reading through some edits today. However, I keep reminding myself that procrastination is part of my process, that circling before I land is part of my experience to sit down and write. And it doesn't mean I don't judge it. Like, I wish I could have started earlier on my editing that I want to do today. However, I judge it less than I used to. And for me, that feels like a big win. Have you read the book Art and Fear? I've mentioned it multiple times. Its subtitle is Observing on the Perils and Rewards of Art Making. And they write extensively about how this kind of thinking can get in our way, where we procrastinate. We suddenly run out of it. Writer's block, so to speak, but the artist's block. And quitting is different than stopping, right? We can take a break. And then quitting happens one time. We never pick it up again. But pausing, taking a break, circling, and procrastination is all part of the process. And the more I can see it as just part of my process, the better off I am, the less judgmental I am. There is a universal struggle that artists have, according to the authors Baylis and Orland, about art and fear. And they talk about when the work is done, we can sometimes lose our motivation. And they give examples of people who have one goal and it's their only goal. And when they reach it, they give up, they quit, they're done. And their identity has been tied to it. So someone who has a goal to have a solo show at a gallery, over decades, they finally achieve it and stop painting altogether because it's a bit of a depression, an anticlimactic experience. I know this to be true for students. Right before I graduated college, my dad said, it's okay if you get a little depressed and you just want to sit on the couch and don't want to make art, don't want to read. It's okay. You're allowed to have a rest. And I always remind my graduate students of the same thing. When you accomplish something that you've been so focused on, it can just feel anticlimactic. I know I've done it multiple times in my life. I used to ski, and then I skied in the Alps in Switzerland, and I never skied again. Kind of reached the pinnacle of what I imagined skiing would do. Same thing with surfing. It was just very casual, but then I went surfing in Costa Rica and I didn't want to do it anymore. I think I was skiing and surfing in places really beyond my limits. But it also was the end. I'd done kind of this apex experience in my mind, and I didn't feel motivated to do it again. I do not want that to happen again in other places. I certainly don't want it to happen in writing. And a very wise mentor advised me that as soon as you're done with your first book, get started on your second one. Otherwise, you'll petter out. It will be that point of quitting, just like the examples I've given you and the one from the book about the artist who quit, just did not pick up again. And so that was really good advice, to continue doing the thing. I think of how in races, we're taught to run past the finish line. I'm talking about literal, a 5K or a half marathon. You see the finish line and you don't imagine yourself stopping at the finish line. You pick a further distance in your mind's eye. You put an image of you running fast past the finish line. And that's so you don't slow down at the end. You want to keep going as fast as you can across the finish line and a little further. That metaphor of shooting past the finish line when I've participated in running races helped me so much in maintaining my stamina for long projects. So celebrating each time I finish something related to what I'm writing, celebrating when I send it to my editor, celebrating when I send it to my publisher, also knowing that the publisher will have comments as they fact check. They'll need me to research a citation a little further, something like this. I know it's not done, but in the past, I've put out the books, they finally arrive, and I'm so exhausted. I've done nothing to promote them. A couple of book talks at academic settings, presentations at conferences. Those were all set up long before the book came out. But after the book came out, I was psychologically done. So this time I'm really going to maintain stamina so I can take this book on the road or onto other podcasts and help present it to the world instead of just being exhausted. So I know myself in accomplishing things, I need to have stamina. This metaphor of running past the finish line also worked really well as my son was applying for college. It is such a long process, the applications, the letters, the essays, and each one that he mailed in, we celebrated. And I just kept reminding him, maintain stamina. It's not over. We celebrate here and we keep going. So he's doing a lot of work long past when all the acceptance letters came in, sending in AP scores and transcripts and applying for dorm, all these details that require a little bit of attention. We have to maintain stamina. There's a large number of art students who, after graduation, end up losing their stamina for art making. They don't have a detailed, specific purpose for making art. They're not really visualizing the future and what it would look like to make art in this next phase of their life. Now, it would be a real crisis if other professions had a similar kind of dropout rate. What we end up doing, though, is holding ourselves back because we didn't reserve a little stamina, preparation, and willingness to engage with the unknown, knowing that if you keep making art, something will happen. I think there's several ways that you can kind of combat this. One is to make friends with people and know people who are persisting in whatever it is that you're persisting in. If the struggle is the laundry pile, the perpetual laundry pile, you can read some jokes by Irma Bombeck or get on Threads and see what moms are saying about the laundry and the amount of laundry that we have to just keep doing. Being friends with people who are starting their business, but who are also successful in their business. So it's important to know people who are a few steps ahead of you, people that have persisted in whatever it is that they're doing. And the other way to experience this in a different way is thinking about process. That the end goal is not necessarily the point of art or business or relationships, The end goal in a relationship is not having a wedding. There is no end goal. The goal is to be in relationship, to enjoy the process of relationship. So that end goal doesn't exist in relationship. And it hardly exists in art either. You might have a specific goal to submit a piece of art or to finish a project to give as a gift. Yet the whole point of making art really is to make art, to experience yourself making art, to understand more about you and others and your community. The practice is really a process goal. I want to continue making art. Or you can apply it to your work. I want to continue being in relationship with my work. And for me, I absolutely want to continue being in relationship with my work, helping women develop their creative and artistic side so that they can solve problems in any area of their life. Being a creative thinker is so essential to all of the aspects of our daily life. When we think about our goal as process, being present for our art making, well, someone will want to look at your art eventually. The goal is not to be in a show, the goal is to be an artist. Where many of the women I work with struggle is in doubts. So thoughts will get in the way of really amazing values and committed actions towards what's important. It's the thinking that causes problems for us. Things like, I'm not an artist, I'm a phony, I have nothing worthwhile for saying, I don't know what's going on, no one's going to want this, I'm no good, etc. These are just thoughts. They're not facts, they're not commands. So what's the solution? Thinking of all of us procrastinating, scrolling on our phones, puttering around the house, cleaning things that don't really need to be cleaned, making relationships about the details and the minutia instead of being in relationship. Well, one way to experience this differently is to think about your vision. What is it that you most want? What are your values? Why are they important? How will you take action on them? But your vision for how you want things to be really matters, and focusing on that can be very clarifying. So many women who come to me in the beginning of our work are not sure what they want, or they pick one of those destination kinds of goals. Another way that we can get more focused on what matters to us is by using our imagination. Imagination is in charge when you begin something, when you begin painting, when you begin decorating your home. Imagination is at work when you open your closet door and decide to get dressed. Building your business is a creative process. However, by the time you have a policies and procedures manual, it no longer can feel like creativity. However, you can reinsert that creativity at every point, no matter what you're doing. You purchase some interesting clothes, but pretty soon you're just wearing the same old, same old. So reigniting creativity in your closet, trying a new art technique, reformulating what's happening in your business. These are the creative acts that inspire us to keep going. And so not allowing things to become mundane, rote, and boring is a huge help when we're trying to step away from procrastination. In running statistics in school, I learned that once you place one number, one point of data, you're starting to lose control over the data set. There is something that's already there. Until you enter that first point of data, you get to be curious and wonder and explore and consider. And then after that, it's really technique takes over and you figure out the appropriate statistic and you run it. The same holds true with almost everything that we do. We can start with a blank canvas, a couple of interesting brushstrokes, and suddenly we can be left feeling uncreative. Something is down on the canvas already, and so we end up having less creative choices because there's already something there. Another area you might consider are the materials that you're using. And having the right materials for the job is essential. You need the right olive oil for cooking. You want a certain kind of olive oil for your salad dressing or to dip your bread in. And you can get not the right kind that tastes best to you. You can get a different kind and it feels way less exciting. So having the right materials for cooking includes the appropriate spatula or whisk. It works for art. If you are wanting to paint and all you have is the Crayola paint set from Target, you can paint, but maybe it's not going to be exactly what you want it to be. You might need to go to a craft store or an art store and see about finding something much more saturated in terms of watercolor. Investing in the right materials doesn't have to be, this very expensive thing. You can find incredible things at garage sales, at Scrap. It's a place where artists can trade their materials here in San Francisco for donation in exchange for being able to take something yourself. It's not about money, it's about investment. It could be time, it could be money, but investing in the right materials. Similar to a wardrobe, making sure that you have the appropriate kind of basics that will kind of free up a log jam in your closet. Having the right shells, if you've got a lot of cardigans, can free up a lot of things. That metaphor extends in so many ways. If you have the right materials, the right mentor or coach or therapist, you can go so much farther, so much faster. Finally, tolerating uncertainty is an essential. Being willing to proceed even when you don't know what the final result will be, even when you're not sure that it's going to be good, even when you're having thoughts. If you're willing to tolerate what feels uncomfortable, you have what it takes to avoid quitting, and you have what it takes to persist in your activities. So here's what I'm doing about procrastination these days. I'm allowing myself to do it. I've set my timer so that my circling doesn't last longer than 20 minutes. I spent way too much time in the kitchen this morning cleaning out this drawer. Had I set a timer, that would have been better for me. So using a timer and allowing myself to have that procrastination is critical for me. I need to eliminate the judgment about circling. And when it's time limited, I feel way better about it. I consider it like a warm-up. You do a little warm-up before you work out, do a little warm-up before you start painting. It's that kind of experience that I can come to appreciate. I'm going to do it anyway. I might as well eliminate the judgment about how I circle before I work. I also remember that this is a human struggle. 0 women I have worked with have said they have no problem with procrastination or avoidance or that dreaded coming close to the end of a project and then abandoning it at the very end. I worked with people who would write their thesis and it's done. Everything's done. They just have to finalize, put the things together in conclusion, and they abandon it and start over. The intensity of their inner stress caused them to abandon what was pretty good. Now they're actually in good company. Tolstoy famously wrote and rewrote War and Peace 8 times, and he was still revising when his publisher said it's time to put it to the press. There are many examples of what happens when we write and rewrite. It might be that we're struggling with letting it be. If we keep redoing a thing, we keep repainting, we keep going over and over it, or we keep struggling with a problem at work over and over and over. Sometimes it makes it great. Sometimes it makes it just the same. However, I think as we come to the end of projects, it serves us to remember that so many things that we admire, art or books or installations of art in San Francisco, are incredible. All of these things have perhaps also come into being perilously close to not existing. There was something about that writer or that artist or the installation artist who kept going. They did not quit and they persisted. Even at the end, when momentum was lagging, when that fear shows up, when the urge to rewrite, to destroy a piece of art and redo it, when that comes up, just know that those things that we admire, all of those people probably have gone through the same thing. There's a photographer, Jerry Olseman. He decided to give a slide presentation where he showed every photo that he had taken in the span of 1 year. So there were over 100 pieces that he had created, and he judged all of them except for 10 to be completely insufficient, and he destroyed them before ever showing them. So the idea that there is so much work that gets produced but is not seen, that gets destroyed, but that photographer persisted, and so we have those 10 images. You are not alone in struggling to persist. You are not alone in the urge to quit or the urge to procrastinate. And so knowing that, like all the things you admire, we're so close to not being here. I hope that gives you a feeling of encouragement. Do let me know what you think about this, the areas where you struggle with procrastination. What is it that you're putting off doing? What are your rituals and procedures for circling before you finish something? And look at the things that you've completed. I think it's not so helpful to look at the things that you've abandoned, but rather the things that you have completed, that you've followed through with. And ask yourself, how did you do that? What happened that you decided you would continue, that you would avoid quitting, and you decided you would persist? You can message me in the show notes. You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Amy Bakos. And I would love, love, love to hear how you're dealing with your own procrastination. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I look forward to speaking with you in the next episode.